Rain fell over Ashford Manor with the persistence of grief. The ancient stone estate stood beneath a sky the color of old iron, its towers disappearing into mist, while water streamed down tall windows that had watched generations arrive, marry and die. Months had passed since the funeral, yet the house remained suspended in mourning, as though time itself had refused to cross its threshold. Lucinda Ashford moved through its corridors dressed in black. At 25, she looked younger in stillness and older in silence. Widowhood had altered her in ways mirrors could not reveal. She had entered this house 2 years earlier as the bride of Edward Ashford, the elder son, gentle in manner and fragile in health. She had expected companionship, perhaps even quiet happiness. Instead, she had become nurse, companion, reader of letters, keeper of medicines, and witness to a slow departure no prayer could interrupt. Edward had not been cruel. That made the loss harder. He had apologized while dying. She still remembered his weakened voice. "I wanted to give you more." She had smiled and told him he already had. After his death, she remained at Ashford Manor because there was nowhere else to go. A widow without children possessed little authority, and even less protection. Yet no one questioned her staying. Not at first. Because there was another Ashford in the house. Duke Montgomery Ashford. 32 years old. Feared across counties. People called him cold because they could not call him wounded. People called him proud because they never saw exhaustion. The title had reached him earlier than expected. Years of responsibility had carved discipline into every movement and restraint into every word. He governed estates with ruthless precision and conversations with even greater control. Servants lowered their eyes around him. Guests measured their speech. No one had ever accused him of tenderness. Least of all Lucinda. Since Edward's death, Montgomery had treated her with flawless distance. Her expenses remained covered. Her rooms remained untouched. Her comfort was ensured. Yet they rarely spoke beyond necessity. If she requested approval for household matters, his answers were brief. If she thanked him, he inclined his head. Nothing more. Lucinda once thought his silence meant disapproval. Now she understood it was his method of survival. He kept emotion locked behind duty. And perhaps duty was the only language he trusted. One gray afternoon, Lucinda sat in the conservatory, reading while rain tapped the glass. The room smelled faintly of wet earth and fading roses. She turned a page, then stopped. Voices drifted through the open doorway. 2 visiting ladies. Soft. Careless. Cruel. "She still lives here? Months after mourning? Well, the Duke could have sent her elsewhere." A pause. Then laughter. "Oh, people are beginning to wonder." Lucinda's fingers tightened. The second woman lowered her voice further. "They say affection began before the brother died." The words entered quietly and shattered loudly. Lucinda closed the book. She remained seated. She had learned that dignity sometimes looked identical to stillness. But afterward she noticed things she had not noticed before. Servants becoming quiet when she entered. Letters arriving less frequently. Invitations disappearing. Eyes lingering too long. Whispers ending too quickly. Rumors spread through society with frightening efficiency. People constructed entire histories from glances and coincidences. They said Montgomery had delayed sending her away because he wanted her. They said she had stayed because she always preferred the younger brother. They said Edward had noticed. They said she had waited. Each version became uglier. Each retelling became more believable. Lucinda endured it. Montgomery ignored it. Until the solicitor arrived. The meeting took place in the Duke's study. Dark wood. Tall shelves. Rain against glass. Lucinda sat opposite Montgomery, while the family solicitor unfolded papers with visible discomfort. "The situation," he began carefully, "is becoming difficult." Montgomery stared. "Continue." The man cleared his throat. "Your Grace, public reputation affects inheritance, political relationships, social standing." Montgomery's expression sharpened. "Speak plainly." The solicitor inhaled. "The Duchess Dowager should either leave the estate or marry." Silence. Then Montgomery said quietly, She is not marrying. The solicitor hesitated. Then people expect. His eyes shifted. That she marry you. The room became still. Lucinda looked down. Montgomery laughed once. Not with amusement. With disbelief. No. The solicitor continued nervously. People already assume attachment exists. Montgomery stood. Cold authority filled the room instantly. She was my brother's wife. The solicitor swallowed. That is exactly why society believes this arrangement will restore respectability. Montgomery looked toward the window, then said with sharp finality, "She is only my brother's widow." Lucinda felt the sentence more than heard it. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Afterward, she found him in the corridor. She spoke first. "You owe me nothing." His gaze shifted briefly. She continued, "I can leave." He studied her. "You have nowhere suitable." Her expression remained composed. "Then I shall find somewhere." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Days passed. The rumors worsened. Then one evening at a gathering, Montgomery overheard women speaking openly. She must have trapped him. Men like the Duke do not marry for affection. Perhaps she entertained both brothers. Montgomery turned. Lucinda stood nearby. Still. Silent. Accepting humiliation with unbearable grace. For the first time, something inside him moved. Not affection. Not yet. But anger. And perhaps something more dangerous. That night, he knocked on her door. Marriage did not change Ashford Manor overnight. The morning after the ceremony arrived gray and disciplined, as though the sky itself had agreed with Montgomery's terms. Duty. Nothing more. Lucinda woke before sunrise in unfamiliar silence. Not because she had entered a strange house. She already knew every corridor, every servant, every cold draft that slipped beneath old doors. But because her place inside it had altered while everything else remained unchanged. Yesterday she had been the late Duke's widow. Today she was the Duchess. And somehow she had never felt less like either. She dressed carefully and descended for breakfast. Montgomery was already seated. Dark coat. Unreadable expression. A newspaper folded beside untouched tea. He stood briefly when she entered. Not warmly. Not coldly. Simply correctly. "Good morning." She answered quietly. They sat. Silver clinked. Rain tapped windows. Nothing else. After several minutes he said without looking at her, "The West Wing renovations begin next week." Lucinda blinked. Then understood. He was speaking of household matters. Nothing personal. She nodded. Breakfast ended. Days became weeks. Their marriage developed rules without discussion. Separate bedrooms. Separate evenings. Shared meals. Formal conversation. Perfect politeness. No affection. No argument. Lucinda accepted the arrangement because she had expected worse. Montgomery never humiliated her. Never ignored her needs. Never treated her with cruelty. Yet kindness delivered from a distance could sometimes feel lonelier than rejection. She occupied her days quietly. She reorganized estate records. Visited tenant families. Helped servants. Opened old music rooms. Requested fresh flowers for neglected halls. The house slowly changed. Small things. Windows opened. Candles remained lit later. Children of estate workers laughed in gardens again. No one noticed at first. Except Montgomery. One evening he returned from inspecting fields and paused in the entrance hall. Fresh flowers. He frowned. The next day, music from distant piano rooms. Another day, servants smiling. He said nothing, but he noticed. Weeks later he entered the library unexpectedly. Lucinda sat by the window reading while a young kitchen maid nervously practiced letters beside her. Lucinda corrected gently. The girl laughed. Montgomery remained unnoticed for several seconds. Then Lucinda looked up. The smile disappeared instantly. Not because she feared him.
Because she remembered herself. The maid hurried away. Lucinda stood. "Your Grace." His eyes moved toward the abandoned notebook. You teach servants. She folded her hands. She wants to read. He stared, then nodded once, and left. But later that evening he remembered her smile, that unsettled him more than he wished. She had smiled like someone who belonged there, like someone not waiting to disappear. Winter deepened, one afternoon. Rain returned heavily. Lucinda insisted on visiting cottages despite weather. She returned, soaked. By evening fever, a maid informed Montgomery, reluctantly. He looked up from papers, then looked back down. Send the physician. The maid hesitated. Double quotes. Yes, Your Grace. Hours passed. Montgomery continued working. Read the same paragraph 4 times. Signed nothing. Finally, he stood. Walked upstairs, stopped outside. Her room. He told himself he only needed updates. Nothing more, yet he knocked. No. Answer, he entered. The room was dim. Lucinda lay asleep. Pale hair loosened. The physician packed instruments. Nothing severe, he said quietly. Exhaustion. Fever. Montgomery nodded. The physician left. Montgomery should have gone too. Instead, he remained. Rain touched. Windows, she stirred. Opened tired eyes. Saw him. Surprise crossed her face. You do not need to stay. His answer came immediately. I know. But he did not move. She watched him briefly, then smiled faintly. Not romantic, not hopeful, just grateful. That expression disturbed him. Unexpectedly, she slept again. Montgomery remained longer than necessary. The next morning she improved. Life resumed. But something subtle had shifted. Now he asked whether she needed carriages, whether she had eaten, whether meetings exhausted. Her small questions, practical questions, yet they existed. She noticed, neither mentioned it. Weeks later she adjusted his cravat before dinner. The movement happened naturally. Then both froze. Her hand withdrew immediately. His eyes remained on her. For one strange second, the room became too quiet. Dinner passed awkwardly. Afterward, Montgomery avoided her for days, because something had entered his thoughts, and he disliked it. He began reminding himself, she belonged to Edward once. You married her for necessity. You protect her because it is honorable. Yet every explanation weakened. Then came the winter gathering. Nobility.music.conversation. Lucinda attended, because duty required it. She wore dark blue, not morning black. People noticed a gentleman spent too much time speaking with her. Young, confident, interested. Montgomery observed from across the room. Too long, too carefully. When Lucinda laughed, politely, his chest tightened unexpectedly. The man requested a dance. She accepted. Montgomery looked away, but not quickly enough. Someone nearby smiled knowingly. The old rumors returned in whispers. The Duke appears displeased. How interesting. Montgomery left the ballroom. Later, Lucinda found him outside. He disappeared. His voice cooled instantly. He seemed occupied. She stared, then understood. Her expression changed. You disapprove? His answer came too quickly. No. Double quotes silence. Then you may do as you wish. Something inside her finally broke. She looked at him directly. I buried my husband. His eyes lifted. Her voice remained calm. I lost years caring for him. Another breath. Then I married a man who reminds me every day that I do not belong anywhere. He stared. She continued softly. You never once asked whether I wanted this. She left. Montgomery remained alone. That night, for the first time he realized distance no longer protected him.
After their argument, Ashford Manor changed in ways no servant could describe. Nothing visible altered. Meals remained punctual. Doors opened quietly. Fires burned in every room. Yet something invisible had shifted, as though the house itself had noticed the silence between its Duke and Duchess, and decided it no longer wished to carry it. Montgomery avoided Lucinda for 3 days. Not because he was angry. Anger would have been simpler. He stayed in his study longer than necessary, rode farther than required, and occupied himself with numbers, contracts, and estate reports that blurred beneath his eyes. Each time he closed a document, her words returned. You never once asked whether I wanted this. The sentence followed him with relentless precision. For years he had believed duty solved problems. Provide. Protect.